Hari Om friends, and welcome to the sixth part of the series on the Karnataka Empire or the Vijayanagara Empire. In this part we will take a look at Malik Kafur's attacks into the Deccan and particularly Dakshinapatha or southern India. So let's move on to the next slide. Now I spoke about Malik Kafur in the previous video of the series. Now new converts like Malik Kafur were and have been always more of a threat, than people who have been Muslims for a few generations. Now, because to prove themselves worthy of their new religion, they usually exceed even their fellow converts in committing atrocities on Hindus. And this is illustrated even till today. A lot of these, hardcore terrorists have been actually Hindu converts, first generation converts. And even more damaging for that period of time was that these people had an insider's view of contemporary Hindu society. So they hated their past, but they also knew how people in Hindu society thought and how they functioned. So they knew the weak points as well, that where you could kind of unravel the whole thing. Now coming back to our topic, so we have seen that Devgiri, Gujarat, Devgiri, all of this was pretty much lost. So let's get the laser pointer on. So that's the kingdom of Lata, Gujarat. You have different states of Rajputana, and this was Devgiri. So Devgiri was pretty much lost by the early 1300s. So what was remaining was you had the strong kingdom of the Kakatiyas, who were the dynasty whose kingdom covered present-day Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. And then you had the Hoysalas, which is pretty much large parts of Karnataka. And then you had the Pandyas in Tamil Nadu, and you had the dynasties of the Kerala. So from this kind of boundary onwards, or somewhere here, everything was pretty much 100% Hindu. And Warangal or Orugallu. So today's Warangal, which is 100 kilometers from Hyderabad, and I think is the second biggest city in Telangana, was the capital of the Kakatiya kingdom. So the Kakatiya kingdom, as I've indicated on the map, covered a wide area, including most of present-day Andhra Pradesh, parts of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Orissa, and obviously Telangana. So the Kakatiya kings were Suryavamshi Kshatriyas. And I mentioned Rudrama Devi, so the great Kakatiya queen in the previous video. So in the early 1300s, the ruler was her grandson Prataparudra, again a very valorous and able ruler. The Prataparudra was also a very ambitious ruler who carried out regular campaigns against the Hoysalas further down south in Karnataka and against the Devgiri Yadavas and the Pandyas of Tamil Nadu. So we have got gaps, so we don't know what was the kind of configuration once the Delhi Sultanate or the Muslims had established themselves in Devgiri, because there's almost, if you think about it, there's almost a gap of 10-15 years, because the Muslims had properly established themselves in Devgiri by early or mid 1300s, and the first invasion began in 1310. So a few years, so we don't know what the configuration was. Now let's move on to the next slide. And the Kakatiyas were again a very great Hindu dynasty. So one of the great examples of their architecture is in Warangal. There is the Torana, the Arch of Warangal. So very famous. You can look up the images online, and there are still surviving temples such as the Ramappa temple. So again a very superb example of Kakatiya architecture. And the Kohinoor diamond. So Golconda, people might know or might not know. So Golconda and India were in India and the world was the only source of diamonds. So the diamond mines of Golconda were very famous, and this was the fact till South African diamonds were discovered, in the late 1800s. So the Kohinoor diamond, again, it passed from the Kakatiyas. It was stolen from the Kakatiyas by the Muslim sultans, and then it kind of went around. And obviously the final theft was by the British, so the biggest thieves of all. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And the first invasion of Warangal. Now this is a little bit dated map. I think a couple of dates on here are not correct, but near abouts. So in the previous series we also saw the example of Kanhardeva Sonigara and his son Vikramadev, So both of them attained Virgati within 3 or 4 days of each other during 1311 of the Common Era, when Alauddin launched the final invasion of Jalore, and the women of Jalore committed sati to save their honor. Now, if you remember, the first invasion of Jalore happened in 1300 when Kanad Dev, intercepted the Muslim forces who were, uh, going back from Gujarat to Delhi. So there was a gap of again 11 years. So you have to, and nothing is mentioned about these 11 years because obviously there must have been a lot of fighting, repeated invasions, but typically Muslim chronicles never mention all of these things. So it's only from one victory to another victory, and the timelines are very mixed, so that first victory could be today and the next victory could be after 100 years, but then everything in between is simply skipped. So you kind of get a very distorted view saying, we are winning all the time, whereas you won once and you were beaten back 99 times and then you won again. So this is the kind of thing, so you have to be quite careful when reading these Muslim sources, even the translated ones which you get freely on the internet. So once Rajputana was kind of subdued, and Devgiri, even Rajputana is not really relevant here, because the route to Devgiri and then the south did not pass through Rajputana anyway, so you would bypass that. So Alauddin Khilji then turned his eyes on the Kakatiya kingdom, which was the most prosperous. So a vast force under the command of Malik Kafur and Khwaja Haji started on 31st October 1309 from Delhi. So now we have seen that previously, a few years back, another large Muslim force led by the future Muhammad Tughlaq was actually beaten back and almost destroyed by the Kakatiyas. So this force was extremely well armed and well supplied, and in the 4 or 5 years since the last Muslim defeat at the hands of the Kakatiyas, Alauddin Khilji would have put a lot of resources to make sure there wasn't a repeat of the disastrous performance. So the first encounter with the Kakatiyas took place at Sirpur fort. So there's a fort at Sirpur. So Kafur attacked the fort from all sides. It was a small garrison. The Kakatiya garrison fought valiantly, but there was starvation inside the fort. And another instance of Johar. So Johar was not something that was confined to simply Rajputana or northern India. So this was quite a common tradition. So a huge funeral pyre was lit, and all the Kakatiya warriors with their families jumped into the fire. Okay, so this was the Yajna Kund of war, and whatever few survivors remained, they retreated back to Warangal. So let's get, I think the laser point is already jumping from here to there. Okay, so this is Naldurg, again a very strategic fort, and this is Warangal. So Sirpur was somewhere around here, but the difference was Pratap was very well prepared to meet the invasion. And by some accounts, his army consisted of 20,000 horsemen or cavalry, 100 elephants, and a large number of archers. And what he did was, he pulled all his forces back from the different border forts. Another fort was Hanamkonda, near just outside Warangal, and he concentrated all of them in Warangal. And he was joined by many of his subsidiary chieftains from different parts of Andhra, Telangana. And following a scorched policy, the Telugu soldiers laid waste to the route of the Muslim army. So no food, wells were poisoned, crops were burnt. But this strategy of concentrating all the forces had also another undesired side effect, which was what Malik Kafur was able to quite rapidly reach Warangal, because he didn't have to stop from fort to fort trying to fight his way through. And in January 1310, he was outside Warangal fort, and he laid siege to the fort. So on 19 January 1310, they began the proper siege of Warangal. So the first step, they captured the hill fort of Hanumakonda, which overlooks Warangal city, and from which the interiors of the Warangal fort and city were visible. So what they did was, they set up these catapults or trebuchets called Manjanike Maghrib, and these were huge ones which could fire stones weighing tons into the city. So let's have a look at the fort itself. I haven't visited the fort, so I intend to go sometime, because Warangal isn't very far from Hyderabad. And so this is a map of Warangal fort. I got this from the internet. It's a ASI kind of thing. And what I want to point out is, this shows the fort as it was previously. So there was a huge water moat around the fort, first line of defense. and you had the drawbridge and the gates. Then you had the defensive walls, and then you had the second line of defense, or the third line of defense, which was again the moat. And then you had the proper city and palaces and everything in between. This is how it looks today from Google Maps. So you can see there's this massive outer fortification wall, so you can still see the remnants, and there's the inner fortification wall, and you can see it's a massive kind of layout. It's a huge layout, and all around here you can see Warangal city itself, and obviously there's population inside as well. So you can imagine when it was in its prime how it would have looked. So Warangal was a great fortress. So circumference was 12,546 yards, and it was protected, as I pointed, by two massive walls. The outer wall was made of mud and the inner wall was made of stone. And I just get the laser pointer on. So these were essentially two different forts. So you had the first fort here, which was the first defensive kind of cordon, and then you had the stone wall, and then you had the second defensive cordon. So it was really a fort within a fort. And the outer wall had nearly 70 burj, or bastions or towers, manned by Prataprudra's chiefs, who were known as Nayakas. And the outer wall was also, as a pointer, surrounded by a large moat. Now, as per Professor Venkataramanayya, the fort was well equipped with weaponry to withstand a prolonged siege. And this means probably they had catapults of different sizes. In Sanskrit, they are called yantras. Trebuchets, different, giant crossbows. So even the Chinese used that time giant crossbows. And one arrow was so big that it could pierce 10 men standing in a row. So these are huge, the arrowheads were this big. And his army was equipped with the most advanced equipment of that age, including trebuchets, wagoners, catapults, all of that kind of stuff. So what Kafur did was he set up his headquarters a mile from the main gate and ordered his army to pitch tents all around the fort. And each division of his army was responsible for 1,200 yards of the perimeter of the wall. And they had to kind of besiege and take their portion of the wall. So Kafur, now the Sultanate, even Hindu kingdoms, they had a very good postal service, which is why I kind of still am a bit puzzled. See, Hindu kings were not fools as is usually portrayed. It's not like they were completely unaware of what was going on in the world around them and sitting in their cozy cocoon. But there were some factors which we don't know at this distance in time, which meant that for whatever reason they were not able to take action in time to save themselves when the threat was impending. So the Sultanate again had a very good postal communication system, just like the Mongols of that time. And message could reach Delhi in 24 hours or a couple of days. I think I might be wrong on that. But Kafur's the Sultanate's postal service was destroyed by the Telugu soldiers who were ambushing from behind enemy lines. And just like Kanhardev Sonegara, who launched a night attack on the Muslims in 1300, so Vinayaka Deva, who was Prataprudra's son, he launched a very valiant attack with 1,000 horsemen on the Muslim camp. So there was heavy fighting, but the attack was foiled. And the Muslims till this point had not even made a small dent in the outer wall. But finally they concentrated on one piece of the wall, and they were managed to break it open. And they rushed through the outer wall. Heavy fighting followed, and once the outer wall and the outer fort were lost, everybody retreated to the inner fort. But the inner fort, things got very cramped because you also had a lot of civilians who had come from surrounding areas trying to escape the Muslims. So food started running out very quickly. Conditions became pretty bad, and eventually what happened was there was a lot of civilians. So once the Muslims entered the outer wall, they started launching projectiles, catapults, stones, arrows straight into the fort. So this meant that a lot of civilians were being killed. And even you can imagine that treating a wound would become quite impossible in these conditions. So Prataprudra had to sue for peace, and finally on 20th April, a ceasefire or a surrender was agreed. And as per the truce, Prataprudra had to give Kafur all his treasure. This amounted to a golden image of Prataprudra, 100 war elephants, and nearly 1,000 camels laden with gold. Now, we don't know if this is an exaggeration or this is truly the case, but you have to remember that if you think about the Padmanabha Swami temple in Kerala, which was protected by the great Dharmic kings of Travancore, by the Dharmaraja of Travancore, they did not touch one single rupee because everything was and is the property of Lord Vishnu or Padmanabha Swami. And it's only when this modern secular state kind of got its claws inside it, so we don't know what's going on right now with the Padmanabha Swami temple treasure. But that treasure amounts to lakhs and lakhs of crores in today's value. So typically Hindu kings were like this. There were no major invasions till that point of time, especially invasions of a kind where you had these Islamic fanatics trying to steal, rob, kill, rape and do everything else. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of treasure which was securely kept by the kings. Again, we have to take these numbers with a pinch of salt, but something worth keeping in mind. So additionally, Prataprudra had to agree to pay the jizya because he was a kafir like me or like us and not a Muslim, and sent an annual tribute. So Prataprudra did dutifully send the tribute every year till Alauddin's death in roughly 1316. So Kafur reached Delhi back on 10th June, so roughly 2 months of marching, 10th June 1310, and he was obviously given a grand reception by Alauddin for a variety of reasons. So this is an example I wanted to show you. So this medieval kind of manuscript drawing shows it's actually not from India. It shows the Mongols attacking, I don't know what city, somewhere in the Middle East, maybe in Syria or somewhere. And what I want to highlight is this war machine. So you can see these giant stone balls. So if you have seen some of these Crusader type movies like the Last Kingdom or something like that, you would see these giant machines. These are known as trebuchets, and this is a counterweight trebuchet. So what happens is you load a stone in the catapult sling, which is not visible here, and then the weight drops and the momentum kind of throws this catapult ball or the iron ball, or the stone ball rather, not the iron ball, the stone ball right into the fort, and the force is devastating. So if we have got defenders here, it will simply smash through them, it will smash through buildings. What you can also load in here are flaming projectiles, so you can have different flammable kind of objects, soaked in naphtha. You can set them on fire, and this flaming projectile will set fire to all these buildings over here. So quite devastating weapons of that age. And so that's really what I wanted to show you, and that's pretty much it for this time. Okay, let's move on to the last slide. Just bear with me. Okay, so that's the last slide. Couple of technical glitches this time, but hopefully next time will be smoother. So next time we will have a look at the Hoysala kingdom. Okay, and this was ruled by the great Veer Ballala III or Veer Ballala Tritiya. So very great Hindu king, and he was the last one literally left standing. Once all the major Muslim invasions till and after Muhammad Tughlaq's time. So he was the last kind of survivor of all of these. But we'll cover this in the next time. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video and this is not dragged on too long. And I will see you next time. Hari Om.